forward to you, man.
Ready when you are.
Very good. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My name is Miles Fields, and welcome to our discussion today on prostate cancer. Our goal today is to save lives. This is the 11th year of the Know Your Numbers event here at Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church. And we're here to make meaningful change, to help us survive, help us continue to be alive for ourselves, our family, and our community. Prostate cancer, it's continued to increase among the African American community, amongst black men. 76% higher than white men. Almost twice the number of black men are dying from this disease. Because Enon is committed to the health and our community, and key to that is that preserving the life of older men, older black men. Today, we have assembled a diverse group of expert panelists who will share what they know with us, who will share the importance of understanding this scenario, this disease, things that we should know, because this disease is affecting us disproportionately, and we need to all collectively fight against it. I'm sure that almost every one of you in here, if I asked you to raise your hand, you could share or you are connected with someone, some gentleman, man in your family member that has been affected by this disease. I myself, I lost my grandfather and also my father-in-law to prostate cancer. So it is a significant issue in our community. So let's go ahead and get started, and I will introduce you to our esteemed guest as we move forward and as we progress through today. Our guest today on the panel, we have Dr. Michael Daniels, Reverend Blaine Newberry, Dr. Camille Reagan, Naturopathic physician Dr. Paul Hopkins, and clinical trial educator Dr. Keith Crawford. So as we move through our panel discussion, I'm going to ask a few questions to our panels, and we're looking for them to respond and give us some insight and good information as we continue to learn from our panelists today. So it's been said for black men, it's not a matter of if you will get prostate cancer, but rather when. When will you be diagnosed with it? And what do you do when you receive that diagnosis? But let's dig a little deeper into how this disease is ravaging the black community. Dr. Daniels, as a urologist, you must come up against the frightening statistics that African American males face related to prostate cancer. Can you set the stage for us? But before you do, since we want our listeners to know the various resources and entities working to address these issues, can you provide a quick overview of your role, then help us understand the prevalence of prostate cancer in African American men and how that compares to other demographic groups?
Excuse me. I'm a urologist. I've been in this community for almost, 20, Million Man March, so that's what, 26, since 95. I came back here. I was practicing initially in Dallas, Texas, where I was trained. And I've gone back with the prostate cancer conundrum before the PSA era as a resident. We obviously didn't have great numbers back then, incidence and prevalence rates, although we knew prostate cancer was still a very prevalent cancer in the communities. The numbers obviously started picking up with PSA screening, digital rectal exam, awareness, et cetera, throughout the late 80s, early 90s. And then there was some overshoot with doing the screening, such that it was determined by certain professional organizations that we were over-screening, we were over-treating, and so the guidelines started changing. And some feel that those guidelines changing in terms of who's supposed to be screened, what age group, high-risk groups, some feel that that's led to more aggressive cases as of the last, let's say, 10 years, when the guidelines started being changed around 2012. But the awareness that where my role is, is that I usually get them in from primary care practices or even through word of mouth, who have either an elevated prostate blood test, PSA, usually, and then we're the first ones that make the diagnosis, the urologist in our offices, details aside, because I want to be brief. We can elaborate if necessary, if there's time. But then once the diagnosis is made, then we have to determine what's called staging, as you guys have heard. We also want to grade it like you get a grade in school, A to F. And the worse it is, the more aggressive it is, the more there's a need for treatment, active treatment. But there's a role that's arisen also, and you have to, again, details aside, for leaving the, for what's called active surveillance in a group of lower risk men. That is acceptable, very acceptable. But what we're looking at, since we're talking about higher death rates, we're looking at awareness, earlier detection, and follow-up. And that's really very important. And whatever the means to do that, through some of the academic organizations like Dr. Reagan and Dr. Crawford represent, I think that's where we're going to get the most bang for our buck in terms of increasing our awareness, our early detection, because it's real obvious that in a equal access organization, race stops playing a role. Equal access to care. Race does not play a role in terms of our outcomes. So I think the real challenges are to get access. Awareness first, of course, access, evaluation, treatment and management, and follow-up. I'm going to stop right now and ask if there are any other things maybe I left out.
Do you think there is any bearing with economics?
Absolutely.
Like community?
Absolutely. That's been studied. And, even with what I told you about active surveillance, where we're just following the patients, I call it watchful waiting, but it's active surveillance. Well, I was mentioning Dr. Reagan, how we're seeing what's called financial toxicity. In other words, you got people, because of, poor socioeconomic group, lower levels of, let's say, primo insurance, if you will, that there are continuity issues, there are compliance issues. I have people that don't want to pay co-pays, for instance, so they won't stay on point, or maybe they can't pay the co-payments. So in a real-world situation, you have to take into consideration the socioeconomic variables that influence our role, or our management. And so, yes, I feel that absolutely plays a role. Also, and it's been shown how our numbers as black physicians, for instance, and frontline workers, even in oncology, particularly oncology being the study of cancer, have paled by comparison in medical school, urological training. And so when our faces aren't seen, I'm talking about even at the level of a medical assistant or a nurse or doctor, physician assistant or whatever, that also has been shown to affect people's compliance, black males' compliance with the system. So we need more people like us sitting on this panel for sure, because we have a different level of camaraderie, and there's a different level of trust that's been shown. It's not just me saying this. So, yes,
Absolutely.
it's important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniels.
Sure.
And you mentioned oncology. And Dr. Reagan, as an oncology researcher, you've cared for the health of many men, and you've seen a good number of them go to develop or continue to develop prostate cancer. Can you first describe your role and where you fit in as part of men's health care, the toolkit, and also how are you involved in the prostate cancer story? Then can you help us better understand the risk factors that predispose an individual Black Caribbean man to prostate cancer over another?
Thank you. So I am an oncology researcher, and my role really is to try to answer the unanswered questions, to really understand what are some of the causes of prostate cancer and how can we help to prevent, but also for those who are diagnosed, how do we help to improve outcomes? So I'm on the research side of things. We know from our research that for Black men, prostate cancer tends to present itself in a more aggressive disease, and there are a number of reasons for that. There are several risk factors that we know already, one being genetics. There are some genes where there are mutations that occur that will predispose individuals for cancer. We know a lot of this in the breast and ovarian cancer field, and now we're starting to learn that for prostate cancer, some of these same mutations are also presenting themselves as risk factors for prostate cancer. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done. We know that family history is also another important risk factor. Men that have a family history of prostate cancer, those men tend to have a higher risk of developing the disease. But also, I think what maybe many of you may not know, if you have a family history of breast and ovarian cancer in your family, those men in those families are also at an increased risk of prostate cancer. So again, genetics, family history, but then also lifestyle, diet, and exercise. These are also important contributing factors. In terms of diet, we know that diets that are high in red meat and low in fruits and vegetables are actually, that is a risk for increasing your chances of getting prostate cancer. So what you would want to do in terms of prevention is to reduce your consumption of red meats and eat higher levels of fresh fruits and vegetables. Exercise is also, physical exercise is another important factor that contributes to prostate cancer. Having regular exercise is very important because obesity is the risk factor. And what the research actually tells us is that it's the way you carry your weight for men. The waist to hip ratio, where you carry your weight around the belly. That is where obesity plays an important role in increasing your risk for prostate cancer. So I would encourage many of you to think about these things, because these are all things that we can try to address, whether it's lifestyle, diet, physical exercise, but just knowing your family history is important, because then you can go on to speak with your doctor about making sure that you're doing the necessary screenings that need to be done to help to improve your chances of detecting prostate cancer early or hopefully preventing altogether.
Thank you, Dr. Reagan. You're definitely giving us something to think about. Had a half rack of baby ribs last night, so thank you very much for that. Definitely be more conscious.
All in moderation.
All in moderation. Absolutely. And Dr. Daniels, I want to throw this one back to you. As you're working to prevent prostate cancer and reduce the overall burden, can you talk about some of the services that your office provides? Can you share a bit more about what you and your office does and how?
Well, anyone who's come to see me or has heard of me knows that I'm heavy on counseling. I'm heavy on pointing, mostly in an online manner, because there's so much information online, and I know that people are going there anyway, and I try to help them filter the information. And I'm a staunch advocate, as a lot of men at this church who've seen me at some of the work, the men's groups prior to the lockdown, know, for nutrition. And there's a good, even coming out of New York, Langhorne University by Dr. Stacy Loeb and some of her colleagues, Gupta and the rest, that are showing how even a complete plant-based nutritional regimen combined with, I don't like the word exercise, I don't like the word diet, so I just say move, fitness. You think we baby boomers are jacked up with a sedentary lifestyle. Come on, you know our kids. So move. And this data is level 1 evidence that this nutritional regimen works. I don't even like the terms that they put necessarily, vegan, vegetarian, and all that. And it's been looked at and toyed around with for at least the time I've been in residency and out in practice for 30 years. So I talk about that. I also try to get the men to understand the role of compliance, the role of reaching out to significant others and having them support their mission, if you will, because it's very important not to be alone in this situation, because you can feel as if, well, it's just me, and that can create a regression, if you will, in the person's, and even depression. And we've seen that even increase a lot during this lockdown, where you've seen about 20, well, maybe 30-some% of men are developing a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder that are either diagnosed or undiagnosed. They got elevated PSAs, they haven't followed up on it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is very real, to try to have as much support as possible, which I provide. And a lot of it's informational, but also follow-up and stressing the need for compliance. And though I feel the yield of change in the men is not what I would like, but I know I do impact and create some changes in the behavioral modification, et cetera. So that's what I really stress: education, follow-up, early detection, and follow-through. That's
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Dr. Daniels. And you mentioned something about this new generation. It'd be interesting, maybe we can come back around and talk about how prostate cancer is being addressed within the different generation cohorts. But we can come back around to that. Reverend Newberry, as a prostate cancer survivor, you are definitely on the panel here to help us talk about some of your experiences here with some of the statistics. You were directly impacted. Can you walk us through your journey with prostate cancer, those early days, around the time you were diagnosed, and how it affected you and your family?
Sure. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. I like collard greens. I eat kale. I love string beans. I eat broccoli. I eat Brussels sprouts. For some of you who don't know what they are, little cabbages. But just saying that jokingly, I am a 12-year survivor of prostate cancer, and some of you know my own story. It's interesting. I don't even put myself on a level of a survivor now. I'm just a warrior and a champion for all of us, a family of men of color. When I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, none of the percentages that you see were evident. They weren't on the table. We weren't even talking about men of color and high statistics in terms of whether we're diagnosed, undiagnosed, or whatever. It was because of what was within me and what I learned. I just took a single-handed journey to say, look, I'm going to be responsible, but my motto during the process was, you can live. And I only got that because of my faith. I realized my faith had to more or less overconsume me in the process of prostate cancer. What was interesting for me, I was diagnosed in 2011. But prior to 2011, from about 2006 until about 2011, I suffered, and I don't say that word lightly, I suffered from bouts of enlarged prostate, and which led to complications of urine in the blood, urinary tract infections. And you know that hit me mentally as a man, because all I knew in my household, growing up with 9 aunts in a house, if you got a UTI, that was a female thing. But little did I find out that because I suffered from enlarged prostate, that no, it's a male thing too as well. So as much information as we can get about ourselves, the awareness, you know, family history, all of that is fine, but it's a process. Thank God that I have a great wife who stuck beside me, took her FMLA just to make sure that I recovered well and so forth. My comedy routines even got better when my prostate recovery followed through. However, what's important, my message today, it's not more so about what I went through, but it's about encouraging men to say, get screened, get screened, get screened. Get the PSA, get the DRE. It's extremely important that we do this. And what happens as we do it, as you're in here, the word spreads. It begins to take on a contagion spirit where you see me doing it, I'm here, I'm still living. And my results for 12 years have been 0.0. 0.0. And I don't say that lightly. That means everything for us. But did it mean, yes, changing my diet? Did it mean making sure that I concentrate on mindfulness? Don't concentrate on those things that cause me to go below myself, but focus on those things which are positive and vibrant in life. Nature has so much to offer us, and I know we as men sometimes don't take to nature like we should, and I'm sure Dr. Paul will speak to that. But it's important that you get screened, and screened. Don't wait until men know your numbers. Make sure that you have a primary care physician whom I had a great relationship with, who referred me to a urologist who I had a great relationship with, who referred me to surgeons who I had great relationships with, even specialists whom I had great relationships with, because I wanted to know as much as I could know to educate myself about the prostate and prostate cancer. I mean, look, if the organ looks like a walnut, I eat walnuts. Every time I look at a walnut now, it's an interesting conversation I have with me and this brother that sits on my right shoulder. But what's even more advantageous to my conversation is relationship. I have a relationship with Dr. Daniels. I went and I have consulted with Dr. Daniels. I have a relationship with Dr. Reagan. Dr. Reagan, because of my history and my ancestry, reaches as far back as the Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, which brings up other medical challenges that I should be looking at for myself going forward with the rest of my life. Dr. Paul Hopkins is my naturopathic physician. Dr. Crawford is our clinical director, clinical trials director, and patient education with the Fin Network. How did this all happen? I never asked God, why did he permit me to get prostate cancer? The more this thing opens up for me, he's caused me to be in touch with these persons here and some in the audience, other representatives for Fin, but even you all as my brothers of the faith who are here at Enon together. We have a major message to send to our brethren that we can live, but we have to do it one step at a time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And a recurring theme that we're hearing is about early detection, right? And the screenings will definitely lead to better outcomes. And so this next one, I'm going to ask for Dr. Crawford. Can you discuss the data that correlates outcomes with early screening and diagnosis?
Thank you for inviting me. And when I drove up in the Uber, I started to smile because there was a whole bunch of black men and a whole bunch of people's lives that we were about to touch. So I wanted to say that. So to answer that question quickly, earlier detection saves lives. If the prostate cancer is found localized inside the prostate, the 5-year survival rate is 100%. If it's localized in the prostate, the 10-year survival is above 96%. But one thing that I'm going to say is this. If it's found outside the prostate in other parts of the body, the 5-year survival may drop to about 30%. The 10-year survival, 18%. But I make these statements and I give you these numbers to tell you prostate cancer is a journey. If we don't catch it early, we're going to catch it. Because the new technologies, the new treatments that are coming down the pipeline, you know, the average person, when they hear you have stage 4 prostate cancer, you know, we look at TV, stage 4. I don't know what stage 4 is, but I know it's the last stage, somebody said. Well, if they said that, then is that your life is over? It's not. It is not. There are tools in the tool chest. If you do this, will extend your life. So you're not dying in 6 months. And I can give you numbers of men who were diagnosed late. 12 years out. 5 years out. There's a young man who PSA was 1,400. Diagnosed, not at his primary care doctor, not diagnosed by a urologist, diagnosed in the emergency room because he had back pain. Five years. Diagnosed in 2018. There's another thing that I wanted to bring up too. See, when we talk about numbers, there's a tendency to generalize. I'm going to ask you a question. And if you listen to the media, the leading cause of cancer in men is melanoma, right? Right? Why is it you never hear the leading cause of cancer in black men is prostate cancer? Because it is. It's always behind the generalized population. And what I say is, in our society, everything is local. And I purposely pulled out my computer because I have a slide that I'm going to show at 2 o'clock. I looked at Philadelphia. I looked at Pennsylvania. And I looked at the top counties with black folks. And surprisingly, there's a whole bunch of black folks in Philadelphia County. Did you know the population of black men, black folks in Philadelphia County represents about 43%? But did you know that 52% of the new cases of prostate cancer, 52% higher incidence of prostate cancer in black men in Philadelphia County? And what you won't hear is, by the way, since black men are diagnosed at a later stage, 81% of those diagnosed at a later stage are black. When you hear the numbers, you don't hear the numbers that in Philadelphia County, 154% higher death rate, prostate cancer, compared to white men. You don't hear it that way, kind of glossed over. So I wanted you to hear the hard numbers. But what is the overall message here? Early detection screening. Early detection screening saves lives.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Dr. Reagan, one would imagine that patients in regular care are screened at the appropriate intervals. Can you share the prostate cancer screening guidance and what barriers affect Black men from getting screened at lower rates than other racial ethnic groups?
Yes. So the American Cancer Society recommends that Black men in particular should have a conversation with their doctors and start talking about screening at the age of 45. That's actually lower than other racial groups, okay? So that's the recommendation. At 45, you should be having that conversation to weigh the balances in terms of your risk and your family history to start talking about screening. Some of the things that I guess prevent men from wanting to screen, there are a number of them. One obviously is education and that relationship with your doctor. Mistrust is another contributing factor. There's also barriers as it relates to access to health care, lack of insurance or lack of sufficient insurance. These are some factors that do contribute to why men don't get screened. But I think another thing that's really important is the stigma associated with screening for some men. And I can say this for some Caribbean men, the stigma behind screening is a very important barrier, particularly for the DRE examination. And so these are things that we need to really talk about openly and have some really important discussions because, again, as it was said, screening saves lives. When you screen, you have the chance of getting it detected earlier. And the earlier prostate cancer is diagnosed, the better your outcomes will be. That's the bottom line.
Thank you so much. Sure, absolutely.
And respectfully, I wanted to make one comment. The American Cancer Society, so Finn put together a table of all the top 4 groups that discuss early detection screening. The American Cancer Society says 45. The National Comprehensive Cancer Network, NAUA, suggests discussions to begin at age 40 if you have African ancestry or if you have a history of prostate cancer. So I wanted to put that out there. So they're still starting to move it down even further. And then the AU, because I was on a panel announcing the program with American Cancer Society in February, and they are going to focus heavily on prostate cancer and have emphasis on Black men. And they're going to plan to change their screening guidelines to reflect age 40 to begin screening. And the second thing is this, to get everybody to recognize there's the digital rectal exam, but what we're talking about is starting with the blood test, PSA, at age 40 and having that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford. Sure.
To follow up on what Dr. Crawford and Dr. Reagan were mentioning as far as screening is concerned, American Urological Association, as well as National Comprehensive Cancer Network, ACS, it seems to be, all right, remember I mentioned earlier how in the early stages of PSA screening, again, I go just back to the pre-PSA era, there were, by 2012, 2010, 2012, it was felt that we were doing too much screening. So they changed the guidelines. And in recent times, the American Urological Association, for instance, right now says men between 55 and 70 need to be screened. Nobody under 40. And this age group between 40 and 55, the conversation needs to be had in terms of screening for high-risk groups. Now, we're being a high-risk group. I recommend that the men at least come in and get a baseline PSA, even if they have no family history. But if their PSA is 0.3, like mine has been forever, then they don't have to come in every year, but they still need to be aware and continue to educate themselves, practice proper nutritional, follow some nutritional rules, if you will, and not be a couch potato. But what was seen when, at least from the American Urological Association perspective, when the numbers in the 40s, the guidelines changed to exclude men less than 50 for sure, is a bump in more aggressive cases, which has been argued, as to do we need to return to these screening things. And Dr. Crawford, you know what I mean? Do you think that we're back to that, except for less than 50, except that the conversation needs to be had? And do you think that possibly that may get, skewed a little bit as it relates to higher risk groups?
Well, so you hit the nail on the head. Let me say it again. Black folks are high risk. Can we just drive that point home? I don't care what anybody's going to say. We're at high risk. And you need to start early. And when the AUA and the National Comprehensive Cancer Network, these are the people out of 26 to 27 institutions throughout the United States, plus one black advocacy organization, FIN, sits on that panel. So there's a black presence on that panel that's constantly driving it down. And they're telling you black men, people of African ancestry are at high risk. People with a genetic background, and that was what Dr. Reagan was talking about. Why is that so important? To know what your genetics are? Because the future of prostate cancer care is going to be based upon, is based and more based upon your genetic makeup. There are therapies right now that work better if you have what we call BRCA1, BR, breast, CA, cancer 1. It was just thought to be in women. Now we're finding a relationship between BRCA1 and even HER, which is another receptor protein that's found in cancer. But this is so important. And another thing that I wanted to bring out is this. The discussions that we're having, that people are talking about, not the panel, what you hear out there, does not include the impact of COVID. We're letting you know this. We were already behind in the race, but we haven't even caught up to where we were before COVID. We have not caught up. And there were studies that were done in the Philadelphia area. Certain ethnic groups have returned back to normal. But black folks and black men, when it comes to prostate cancer surgery, hasn't returned back to normal. And there's going to be a delay and a continued delay.
Thank you so much. I want to highlight two different scenarios that we've talked about: early diagnosis and then as it continues in late diagnosis. And we've heard Reverend Newberry's testimony, and we see the healthy state he enjoys now. Dr. Daniels, can you contrast the treatment options that you present to patients based on how early their stages of disease is?
Sure. There's obviously an early stage, low risk version of prostate cancer. What used to bug me the most was that coming out of again, I go way back to the 80s with studying this and being around the top urologists that were training all of us back then. There was this feeling that, well, all prostate cancer was low risk and you died of old age. No, that was pre-PSA. That was pre-really figuring out what was really going on with the prostate, to make it short. So it's a different era than looking at some veteran studies from the 60s and saying that the low-risk prostate cancer that was found in 1968 was relevant going forward in the PSA era. There was definitely an overshoot on, I used to do cancer screens at Bright Hope, all kinds of Zion, et cetera. And even, like I said, before I even came back to Philly, and you'd have I'm going to pseudo-exaggerate to make my point, but you'd have some 20-year-olds in there, and you'd have 90-year-olds that really didn't need to be screened. And so, but even in the groups that were relevant to screen and get positive diagnoses of cancer, there's still another risk group that doesn't need active treatment. So we overtreated. We definitely overtreated. We overcut, operated, took out guys' prostates. I know I'm not a victim. I participated in that. And we overradiated people for active treatment. And we create morbidities, incontinence, erectile dysfunction, not usually, death, mortality, but that can even occur because you're dealing with people under anesthesia, et cetera. So then it became an issue of, do you have to treat everyone? And then by the turn of the 20th, 21st century, it was apparent that we needed to have a group stratified out that was lower risk that we could just observe through what's called active surveillance. And that has opened up a huge category. It's underutilized, particularly amongst blacks. And it's every place, where we're not as likely to have that or take that option. So everyone, and that's a good thing, because even if you're concerned about erectile dysfunction and treatment and urinary incontinence, you don't have to, because I have so many men on active surveillance, because again, they don't need to be treated, especially if they're adherent to a policy of nutrition and fitness. It shows the PSA can stay flatline, repeat biopsies, you can start spreading them out. Like, for instance, active surveillance biopsies don't have to be once a year. You even talk about going 5 years between. I'm almost pushing that at this point with the lowest risk patients, repeat their biopsy. And when the biopsy comes back completely negative, you're talking about some giant smiles on people's faces. Now you've got another risk group that's intermediate risk. And there's some low risk, intermediate risk people. Don't worry about the details of Gleason grades and all that, but that's what you'll have to start understanding if you're diagnosed, is the grading system, the A through F thing. And this lower risk, intermediate group, they also can be on active surveillance. They may need biopsies a little bit more frequently, but they can be on active surveillance. Carefully. The higher risk intermediate groups, though, they're not good candidates for active surveillance. Then we're talking about active treatments with either surgery, depending on the age of the patient, how healthy the man is. These comorbidities are going to kick in. I'm telling you, we baby boomers, our comorbidities are substantial, but they're not going to be anything like this high fructose corn syrup sitting on their behind young group. They're going to be way sicker than us. There's no question about it, because they already are. Some of the stuff that I'm seeing in terms of erectile dysfunction in guys, so I'm thinking, well, they're playing me. They're in their early 30s and they got to have ED, but I tell them, make them get EKGs and they got heart disease. I mean, you guys have heart disease, substantial heart disease in your early, mid-30s. So active treatment can involve surgery or radiation therapy, depending upon the age of the person. What we need to get away from is being too, and all the stuff that people have talked about, screening, et cetera, is important. Because what you don't want to see is the men who come in with the triple-digit PSAs, because they got metastatic disease. What we don't want to encourage is avoidance of the traditional healthcare system to the extent where you're doing it all with herbs and you're doing it all with, I make the joke, the sea moss turmeric thing. Because I've seen these men come in and they're being encouraged, or at least in their minds they feel they're being encouraged, and they're the guys that come in with quadruple-digit PSAs and wind up, there's nothing we can do at that point hardly to help them out. It turns into a palliative type of thing. So again, the treatments of surgery versus radiation therapy are active treatments that are necessary in high-risk groups. And I'm not talking about advanced cases that come in, because that's when they are really in trouble. We're trying to impact a group of men from a prevention standpoint first, early detection standpoint. I mean, prevent so that you come in with a PSA like mine. Ever since I was in my late 30s, it's been never risen above 0.3. So some of this is also, I think, practice what you preach, as a healthcare provider, because it lends, I think, a lot more credibility to your argument or your counsel, your coaching. Like if I'm Phil Jackson, I got Mike and Scotty, I better have played some hoop, right? At least know something about it, or maybe was a hoop player. So those are my thoughts about prevention strategies up front, educating yourself, early detection with the screening tools. Like I tell the guys all the time, look, I love the fellas, I love my prostate, but I hate prostate cancer. And I've been dealing with this for 40 years almost. So that's all I really have to say about that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniels. Really appreciate that.
Sure.
Dr. Hopkins, can you explain your role and share how you work with the entire treatment team to support the best health outcomes in the context of prostate? Also, some might not be familiar with homeopathic treatments, so can you provide a quick primer on homeopathic treatments?
Absolutely. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. I look at the alarming rate of what we're all going through right now. And first, I want to thank, our panelists here, because the panelists are definitely recommending and telling you the seriousness of what situations are going on. And if you haven't gotten it by now, it's not going to get no more serious than it is right now. The bell is ringing. It's very critical right now. And what's happening with it, we look at the clinical trials. I hear the testing, I hear the screening, but ultimately it comes back to, what are you doing? What are you eating? In this world right now, I'm going to come to your defense, though, because the target is moving. The target is moving, meaning that the food is not the way it used to be, right? You can even know right now the food don't taste the same. Some of y'all from down south said, y'all greens up here don't taste the same. But I've actually identified some things that come through in my practice to let you know that it's a time for alert for you to do something. Sometimes with the disparities of African-American men, we decide we don't want to do nothing because you don't trust the system. You don't trust these data. You don't trust, the person that you're looking at. But I'm going to tell you, you got to do something. And it's a heartfelt piece, that this room shouldn't be packed with everybody that's in this entire building. Just by what you heard right here with his stats. Reverend Newberry's personal story. Dr. Rajan and then Dr. Daniels. They're telling you these serious things because it's time to get real. One of the biggest problems is constipation. Did you know that? Constipation. That's the first sign of prostate issues. Very thin wall between the rectum going into the prostate. And why is it that you backed up 4 to 6 times to 7 times the bowel movement in your system? That becomes metastasized and migrates right into your prostate. Some of the first signs would be lower back pain. I heard that mentioned. Urinary tract infection. That's another one. But also you're losing your rhythm. You're losing your cycle. You're losing what's called circadian rhythm. And that rhythm means that you're eating out of cycle. So you got to watch the refined sugars, the refined salts, also the refined oils. Anything refined is already dead, right? The Bible says what? Only life begets life. But if you're eating dead, what are you expecting to get? Got it? You got to start eating for life. And when you pick something up, you got to read and say, what's in this? The industry right now at hand has just flipped as of January 1st, 2023. We went to a cycle of what's called genetically modified organisms. to now this thing called BEs, bioengineered ingredients. We know these things are shutting down the kidneys, the pancreas, the liver. These are your vital organs that do all the filtering. Wait a minute, who's the greatest converter? I'm the converter. We are the converters, right? So if you're eating something that's already been refined, it's already been destroyed, what is your body going to do? It's going to reject it. Or it's going to sit in your body as sludge, and then you're going to start seeing these numbers go crazy. Got it? So I want to tell you today that the stories that you're hearing are real. I deal with it every day. It's a heartfelt piece to me, you know, because I know that you can do something, but you got to wake up and start to change your diet. That means, number one, I would say get your water right. Anybody know what the right water to drink? You got to drink the right water that has life force in it, which is the spring water bottled at the source. They call that God's water because it's so deep in the earth, untouched by air. When they tap it at the source. So that water has all the energy to keep you out of a state of what's called acidosis. So that would be your real big problem. Cancer of any kind is in a state of what's called acidosis. And when you're in a state of acidosis, your body's tearing down at a rate 10 to 20 times faster on the cellular level. So what do? You got to do? You got to know where you are at all times. That's another number, pH balance. So when you get your energy, your body regenerates. So hydration is number one. Constipation, that means don't eat out of cycle. Eating first thing in the morning is the worst thing you can do is eat meat. I heard someone say that, you know, come on, bro, we in Philly. we in the capital of hoagies. And come on, y'all. We sitting around like this thing ain't real. We real. This is real. This is cheesesteaks, hoagies, tasty cakes. Y'all getting hungry right now, ain't y'all? But you can't do it no more. You can't do it. You can't do it. If you go down, one last thing I just want to put, if you go down a list of all your ingredients, I want you to go all the way to the very bottom. There's this thing called BEs, bioengineered ingredients. As of January 1st, this was introduced to the public to say, hey, you got to tell them now. And now this is the things that they're finding in the kidneys. Things like titanium dioxide, things like glyphosates, things like atrazine and chlorpyrifos, the words we can't even explain. But these are the things that are invading your system. And if you don't do something about it soon, we're going to be seeing more devastating numbers across this board. Amen?
So this was just announced, right? The bioengineering ingredients. You know what else was announced? That our life expectancy is starting to decline.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask, when we start bringing these points together at this roundtable, and this is probably the first time anybody in this audience have brought these facts together, what do you think is taking place? Are you thinking that knowing that these bioengineered compounds have effect on our organs, could this be a possible reason why they would come out and say, in addition to COVID,
absolutely,
that our life expectancy will decline? And if the general population declines, we know what happens to black folks.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. As of it was actually the introduction of GMOs came in at about the year, and you can tie this to some of your data also, came in approximately around 2011 or early around the 2000 really, but started to really hit your stores that you probably have in the neighborhood of about 300,000 products in your stores right now that have GMOs, and you don't even know it. You got it? They have in the United States no mandatory labeling laws. That means they don't have the right to tell you. I sit on the floor of the United Nations Special Council. I'm part of what's called the ECOSOC group. And we actually sat there when Obama actually did the actual speech. He said, you have the right to know what's in your food. He came and said, and we were clapping, applauding. We knew we were going to get change, but somewhere along the line, it didn't happen before he got out. So when that happened, now they move forward with the agenda of bioengineered in this GMO. It's actually a GMO. genetically modified organism, and then we never got a response from that, and then started to modify the foods. So now you have in the neighborhood of 300, 400,000 food products in your store right now. And if you just start to look and read, you're going to see these numbers, how they attach. I would love to sit down with you and go over the numbers. But I can tell you this right here, it's all going to come back to energy anyway. You got to remember, the body knows one game. I know one game, that's energy. If it's got life, I can do something with it. If it's dead, I can't do nothing with it. Got it? Only life begets life. So if you're eating something dead, what are you doing? You got it? And then over there, I got one more thing. I'm sorry. I got to talk about the fruits and vegetables. I'm going to give you a little tidbit. You ever see the numbers on the fruits and vegetables? Y'all seen the little numbers, the little stickers, right? The 3s and the 4s, bananas, 4011. That's what's called the international number for creation. Well, that number means something. It doesn't mean just the price tag for the food, but it also means what is that number, where it comes from, what they mixed it with, and also if it's been sprayed. You got it? That's what it is. So 3s and 4s are called conventional. You want to leave those alone. They fall under the conditional rank where initially they modify the seed, the soil, sometimes both, or they spray it. You don't want them. You want the one that begins with the number 9. That means the number 9 represents full FDA approval that it's been cleared. Got it? So that banana, instead of 4011, you would do 94011. Got it? Anything begins with a 6, a 7, or 8, that's called a GE. You ever heard of GE? That's genetically engineered. That's a Frankenstein. All right? So it's called GEs, genetically engineered. Number 6, 7, or 8. So you hear what the conversation is, y'all. Mm-hmm. We're eating dead food. Food expecting life is long gone. They said in 1947 the food doesn't have 47% of its nutrients. In 47. So what does that mean now? That means that the food is so dead that it's more of a ritual and a ceremony when you're eating. You got it? And then we don't go to the bathroom. How many bowel movements most people have? They say, oh, I go at least once a day. I'm good. No, that's the wrong answer. The right answer is if you eat, you must eliminate. You got it? You got it? You eat 3 times a day, you should be eliminating 3 times a day. Where the rest of that's going is sitting in your rectum, putrefying, and it's pushing right up against you. You got it?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
No, I have another question. Listen, I have another question. And that question, and Reverend Newberry commented on his food. And he was talking about Brussels sprouts and broccoli. And a lot of people, that was, even though it went by fast, that was an important point. Could you elaborate on why the Brussels sprouts, broccoli, and kale are so important?
You talking about me? You want me to
okay.
Well, remember when you're talking about phytonutrients, the greatest source of nutrients that you can get is complex carbohydrates. Got it? And you've been told that protein is the only protein. Protein is not the only protein. Matter of fact, the only thing that can grab the nitrogen out the air and to create what's called the amino acids, which is the building blocks of the cell, is actually a plant. So the only reason that a cow or pork or any animal has protein is because the animal eats the plant. Make sense? So you're getting 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation of meat, which right now is one of the most devastating things that you could ever see. And they actually did a last recent study that said that the meats that are coming into the United States, they actually did the combination of DNA and showed that it's by thousands and thousands of animals. Thousands. That's a real study. All you got to do is Google it. But this is where we get back to the conversation of what are we eating? We're looking at data. This board is a powerful board here, y'all. And I think that, you know, together we could probably do some incredible things, because nobody's talking about these things unless the demographic between the allopathic and the naturopathic and the homeopathic, they sort of separate us all three as if we don't exist, and especially if we black. But I'm saying I was from all sides. I started working at a pharmaceutical company. I started working at SmithKline at the age of 14 years old. What in the world are you doing working at 14 years old at a pharmaceutical company? Well, I think God had a plan. You got it? And from that, that's why I'm here now, because I did the control studies. I was actually part of research. I worked with all the major universities here, University of Penn. I worked with Drexel. I've worked with everyone that you can say, including Stanford University, on research. And the one thing they always keep coming back to me, they said, we have no data on African-American men. Now, what is that? Because they don't see it, or that they just don't want it? You know, and I used to ask those questions, but then they escort me out. So I'm just saying to you, yes, let's talk them numbers, man. Let's talk some numbers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carver, for that. You have another?
Just really quickly, when I get questions about nutrition, because I'm such a staunch advocate, I'll have people asking me about what is about all this soy stuff and these plant estrogens. And I'll tell them, look, first of all, 85% of black Americans are lactose intolerant. Now, they can put lactate inside the milk to make it tolerable for you not to have a new disease called reflux or irritable bowel syndrome.
Can you say that one more time and loud?
85% of colored people are lactose intolerant. That's your first clue, because you'll get a new disease out of the deal, Prilosec. Irritable bowel syndrome, you'll get a new disease. It's not a disease. It's your warning sign, a shot over the bow of your ship telling you, you can't even tolerate the sugar from a cow breast. I said, what do you think them giant protein molecules and those enzymes, and we're not even gonna get to the acid part that Dr. Paul was talking about, taking your pH down, 7.41, 7.3, 7. You got to have a buffer. Your bones have to buffer that. That's why you become hugely osteoporotic. But let's talk about raging animals, animals that's pregnant with estrogens and progesterones. That's a cow. Either artificially inseminated or naturally with bull. You know what? And you're telling me that level of hormone estrogen that you should have stopped when you had teeth like every other mammal, if you were fortunate, like I got 6 months, then I became a surrogate cow, a glass bottle, you know, a nipple, the pink, whatever that thing is for the cloth diapers. Mom didn't get the memo because she would not have allowed that. Every other mammal weans. This animal grows from 65 pounds, correct me on the numbers, farmers, and a year later, it's like 600 pounds. That's too much fuel for a human being. And there's some in the plant-based community like Dr. Milton Mills in D.C., who's of the opinion that it's kind of like institutionalized racism. Not kind of like, it's institutionalized racism involved with government cheese programs and milk programs, you know, for people of color. And I agree. The other things that you got to look at statistics of African Americans this, African Americans that. How many people are going to Johnstown and Tyrone and these places where I see white people with clusters in their families of 4 and 5 people with prostate cancer, 45-year-old guys with buffalo humps on their back that turns out to be prostate cancer. I mean, aggressive. And I tell them out there, look, at least in, I don't know, City Line Avenue over, they have this law called NIMBY. Not in my backyard where you run a pipeline or a fracking line, but out here you guys have that. So we got to look at toxic stuff too. And fine, we have, maybe we block vitamin D more than a person with less melanin. But fine, get your primary and check your vitamin D levels. But what are these risk factors that make us independently susceptible to these diseases? And I would still submit that toxicities are still number one, wherever you get them, in the food chain or bad habits, if you will. And those are correctable through conscious effort. Would y'all agree?
And I wanted to add one thing.
Yes.
You brought it up. NIH in 2018 clearly stated that black folks are vitamin D deficient. And,
Probably in more of these temperate zones. My dad isn't down there in West Palm Beach
Yeah.
playing in
But
the
even-
garden all day. He's like 9,900 years old.
Even in the South,
His D
because they're
levels are
not
up.
going outside anymore. And did you know that vitamin D plays a very important role in your immune response? And did you know that Anthony Fauci was taking vitamin D during COVID? And did you know, since the majority of black folks are lactose intolerant, of vitamin D from their milk? See? And so all these little things that you hear, I mean, people, we're talking about published data about COVID that clearly stated that, one, black folks, vitamin D deficient, and that played a role in why we were dying or succumbing to the disease. So it's just not vitamin D for COVID, it's vitamin D to help boost our immune system, because our immune system plays a role in fighting cancer.
Yeah, and I just want to add one thing to that if I could. Vitamin D, there's two types of vitamin D. You got vitamin D3 and vitamin D2. If you don't know the difference, one is what's called cholecalciferol. Cholecalciferol vitamin D3 is actually from oil base. So they take that from the lanolin from a sheep. You ever see when they shave the sheep down? What keeps the moisture is the oils, and that oil they add it with essential oils. Now, that vitamin D3 may not be good for someone who has liver problems, because everything that breaks your liver is what's called the nuclear reactor. That's your power source. When you are connected to your liver, it's the only organ connected to your brain. So if you have liver problems, not D3, D2. D2 is called ergocalciferol. That means that comes from plant-based. That's the one I would suggest you get. That usually comes from things like plant-based mushrooms, things like that. But that's a safer form of breaking it down when most of the people are so toxic that they can't break it or receive it. So it's seasonal. So vitamin D3, or based on season, like you said, with the sun, is based on springtime and summer is 5,000 IUs, and winter or fall and winter is 10,000 because you're not getting the sun. So make sure you adjust it properly, but make sure you get assessed first. Okay.
Thank you so much for that. And I have a question for you. It's about water. How much water should we be drinking every day? Real quick question.
Yeah, absolutely. Water is the key, because remember, it's always half your body weight in ounces. All right? Half your body weight. Now, most people say, I can't drink that much water. And we're not saying do all that water. We say crawl, walk, run till you get to your number. So whatever your weight is, split it in half, and then that's your number of overall water to get in a day. Now, there's a time to drink water and there's a time not to drink water. Did you know that? Yeah, absolutely.
Talk to us.
So there's a time that starts. So what time is it? The time starts, believe it or not. It doesn't mean you got to start this early, but it starts 4 a.m. in the morning till 7 p.m. at night. So that means you got 15 hours to get it in. We say every time you drink water, you're going to eliminate every 2 to 3 hours. Got it? So that means that'll help you when you're traveling. Don't drink water and get on the road, y'all. All right? So in that time, we say not after 7 p.m., because after 7 p.m., you go into spin. That means last time you should be eliminated is around 10 o'clock at night. After 10 o'clock at night, if you're pushing that line, you're pushing the time frame, and you're going into this thing called REM sleep. REM is rapid eye movement. You ever see anybody's eyes going like this, shifting when they sleep? Shut you down, cut all systems off, and I'm going to heal you from this cancer or diabetes or whatever you got going on. But I can't do it if you keep getting up in the middle of the night going to the bathroom. You got it?
And then coming to see
I'm
a
breaking your
urologist.
cycle. I'm breaking your system,
And then coming to
right?
see a urologist because you're up all night urinating. All this water, he's going to get me more patients.
I'm picking them over there, G.
I'm gonna tell you,
Yes.
when you have kidney stones, I take care of a lot of kidney stones. Because there's a lot of variables involved in how much you should drink. What we recommend for one of the worst is honestly in the literature 2.5 liters per day. That's a full bladder. Too late because you're going to be up all night.
Can't hold the urine, has everything.
A lot of
See, a lot of the times when they have the urinary tract infections, it's going to cause an overactive bladder. And a lot of people say, that's why I don't drink water, because I got to go to the bathroom, but not knowing that the underlying problem is they already have a urinary tract infection. I already know that the antibiotics are not working.
Or they have BPH.
Or they have BPH, right. So that's why you got to get with something that definitely cleanses out the system to now that you can start to balance the body out, but don't stop drinking water. You need water. Even if you do an herbal formula, herbs need water to complete the process. You cannot complete the process without water. It's too critical. But not only the amount of water, but the right water.
Thank you so much. Our panelists have made it very clear that diet is critically important to a healthy prostate. And so we thank you all for that information. So we just want to round things out now, kind of turn the topic a little bit more on the impact to our family. I'm going to throw this one out to Reverend Newberry. Cancer doesn't just affect the body, but has a significant mental toll. And can you share the emotional impact and how you dealt with it? Additionally, cancer doesn't just impact the patient, but it impacts families and our caretakers. So can you speak about the importance of faith, spirituality, and coping with cancer, the cancer diagnosis?
Sure. As I said earlier, faith for me carried me through the process, but also coupled with the relationship, a great relationship with a wife who cared. But what's also important, again, I'm going to go back to family. Since I was about 9 years of age, I saw at least, matter of fact, all 9 of my aunts and uncles pass from some form. My cousins and I talk about it today. While I was the first one stricken with prostate cancer, it affected all of us emotionally as young teenagers, where we've seen our parents, aunts, and uncles pass away. So it's important that you know your family history. I can't stress that enough. We're already dealing with all other types of mental challenges. However, mental health isn't new to our culture. I mean, they're bringing it up now, of course, with COVID and so forth. Our people have been suffering from mental health for years. Goes back since family is extremely important. And I'll tell you, brothers who are married, the first person after God that you should talk to is your wife. I don't care how embarrassing you may think it is, and as we talk about in the community, our machismo and all of that. Well, guess what? You want that woman by your side. All right? And if you're not married, you would want your significant other or other family members. It's important that you have people that you can trust. But it's also even more important that people are equally yoked with you regarding your faith, your family, and I'll tell you one more thing, your finances. So it's extremely important. So prostate cancer brings on all those type of discussions. So, Brother Miles, it's extremely important.
Thank you all very much. And lastly, yes, sir. Okay. And lastly, I'd like to wrap up by making sure that we provide you with resources. If you need information on screening, anything about early stages or clinical trials of mental health, please make sure that you see one of our panelists. And as we close out our message for today, prostate cancer is entirely preventable. It's an entirely preventable disease, and I hope that that is one of the takeaways. Face the facts that black men are more than likely going to get prostate cancer. Again, it's not a question of if, it's more so when. And get screened, maintain your health, and find a community. Any questions at this time? Yes.
Everyone that's here as the panelists go. Can you hear me okay? I am a survivor. It's been 2 years. And what I'll share with you is that as Pastor preached one Sunday, it really hit me. I am proof that God is able. I share this with you is because I lost my cousin who was 50 years old 10 years ago. My father didn't have prostate cancer, but his brothers did. 4 of them died of prostate cancer. So I knew that somewhere along the line I would be predisposed. Fast forward, 2021, and I went to the doctors. I had a 7.34 PSA. They said it was greater than just surveillance. 2 months as I waited and waiting for the urologist. When I got that diagnosis, and then they went and they said, well, you have a choice. You can either have the surgery or you can have the radiation. Well, I sat there, and as tears rolled down my eyes, I said, God, what do you want me to do? You make the choice of what you're going to do, and God will sustain you through it. My prostate is gone. I went back, had the PSA. It started slowly going up from 0.1 to 0.2 to 0.3. I went through 35 days of radiation. I had seen what Reverend Newberry had went through, but I was ashamed as I was going through it. I came here today because, yes, I am a survivor. Yes, my PSA is non-detectable, as they say, with less than 0. Now is, yes, still feel less than a man because I still want to do the things that I did before I had this prostate cancer. Number one, the pills that they told me to take, 5 of it didn't work. The injections that they told me to take, it didn't work. So yet I'm here today to say, what can it's not going to come back the same. Thank you.
Appreciate you sharing that, brother. But no, you don't have to give up the farm at this point. You're in a huge category of men who have experienced exactly what you've experienced. I've been dealing with guys like this, I'm telling you, since the late 80s. And if you look at the blue pill, they came out, 1998, had that point. You're talking about injection therapy going back to the mid-70s, Caverject and all that, PDE5 stuff. That's the mid-70s. One urologist got up on the stage and shot himself and, and demonstrated it. That's the story. I wasn't there. I was still at Lincoln University or something. Anyway, we didn't have much at all. Pills kicked in, and they've maybe considered a panacea for it all, but absolutely they don't help the most severely affected individuals like yourself. Throw some comorbidities in there like hypertension, the pills, diabetes, etc., then you really have got a bad situation. If none of this works, pills, injectable medications, then you're a prosthesis candidate, simply put. And then you're home free, and there's some details involved with that, but it's a surgical procedure that you need to think about seriously so that full circle, PSA 0, continence, and quality of life in terms of sexual function is, you basically rounded the circle thing, you know what I'm saying, right? And obviously if that's affecting your quality of life, which it sounds like it, then that's the option. So you need to have that conversation with, your urologist. That's what I would suggest.
Also, brother, I would say, you want to go? I would say, brother, when you hear the quality of life, you can take that and understand that you can regenerate. Got it? Your body regenerates 11 times faster than you get sick. But what we have to do is you got to learn how to eat. You got to learn what's going against you, what's fighting against you. Because even after the prostate, problems have actually gone through all of the chemo, the radiation, still it's going to be a multiple problem coming back again if you don't know how to eat. So you got to start to learn how to eat. You got to know where you are. Start with an assessment. If you start to do things natural and holistic, then you can actually say, these are the things that I got to know how to eat with. These are the ones I got to stay away from. It's a moving target, and I'm going to come to your defense. It's a moving target, but you can get through it. I have plenty of brothers that I'm working with right now that are living a better quality life after the procedures. Got it? Be encouraged, man.
And what I wanted to comment on was there was sexual health, and also want to make sure you take care of the mental health. Because a lot of black folks, when we talk about mental health, that's one of those other things to go in the closet. Nobody wants to talk about. But especially right now, during your prostate cancer journey, you're early in that journey. And so there may be ministries from the standpoint that you can speak with about it. There's docs that could speak to it about it, but also, and something that Reverend Newberry stated, and with his the three F's, and family. And when you're having this discussion, please include your wife. So it's not like you're out there by yourself. But the mental health component is going to be extremely important. Thank you.
Yeah, another, so you're 2 years in. It's an early time that they estimate or guesstimate maybe 12, 24 months or whatever. I'm in 12 years. So I became enthusiastic about what's out there. You know how it is. We're going to try it till it gets right. But what I heard your call saying, you want your mojo. I never use the terminology mojo, but I know exactly what you mean. I just call it going and search for Vietnam and deal with the conflict. But you have, these doctors here who are available to you. You actually have some clinical trials. I was just reading the other day, there are a plethora of clinical trials where they're trying different treatments. And your mind has much to do with your body as well. There's a connection because Dr. Crawford just spoke about your mental health. If your mind burns out, bro, you're done. And that's the way I look at it. So we can always have a conversation. There are other brothers in here as well that can encourage you in this process, but nothing beats talking to your wife. Dr. Reagan is in here, and we have to be respectful of her, so we have to talk around some of the conversation, but she's heard some of it. There are traffic signs, all kinds. One way, two ways, you get it, green light, red light, caution lights, detours, and there are ways to get through. I'm just telling you there are through that process so that you can live a better quality of life. But your mental health is not up for grabs. That's more important than anything at this, and your spiritual health.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. For the sake of time, to respect everybody's time, first of all, I'm David from Cornerstone Church in Audubon. Thank you, Pastor, and I'm really blessed to be here today. I was kind of like a walk-in, but nevertheless, having been here, hearing you over the microphones and the speakers, but yet going to all the different other things, I believe I could and should have sat in this class as well. I'd like to know if I could get some of that information, whether it was recorded or not, or if I could get all your business cards or who you different people are, if I have any additional questions, because I kind of missed it being out there. And I think a lot of people out there maybe should be in here, and I'm grateful to be here for this, the last part. Is this the last part of the panel?
So there is one more panel. that
There's
we're
one
gonna
more?
do.
Okay,
Yeah, this
so I
afternoon.
probably want to be at that because I don't have to be to work till late. But my final question, and thank you, is I'm 63 years old. For the most part, I'm a healthy person. I didn't get the vaccine by choice, but I've never caught COVID by the grace of God. And with that being said, I've been a mostly healthy person, but as learning a couple things upstairs and about prostate cancer, colon cancers, don't wait till you get sick or till you get certain things and have to go to emergency and then get treatment. So I definitely am learning from that. And I do plan to get a colonoscopy and all those other things that I have not gotten yet because I never had any reason to. And I'm finding now at my age and because of my, they say most black people, but bottom line is we and I need to use wisdom and get tested and get, find out what's going on before it happens. And last but not least, because they say diet, exercise, holistic fruits and vegetables are good things to help your health, plus exercise. And I want to ask more about that. I know everybody's different. Each person is different. But what happened with me is at my age, because I do a lot of walking, but I've never done exercise, even though I got 2 free gym memberships. I just never really took advantage of it. So what I decided to do this year, we make New Year's resolutions. I said, I'm going to start working out because, I'm not getting any younger and it's getting hot. So I want to kind of bulk up. So what I started doing was I started going into the gym and just doing the bike. And for the most part, I feel great. I'm healthy, thank God. And then I start doing a little bit of weights, no weights at all, and then all of a sudden my heart started hurting. And I'm like, okay. So I went to emergency. They admitted me. And after they admitted me, they said, we can't find anything, but we want you to do a stress test. So that's what I'm getting ready to go through now. But I'm glad that I got that. Hey, bro. I'm glad I got that effect. So my question is about heart. Did you guys talk about heart? And who could I talk to about anything to do with the heart? Thank you. I'm going to see him. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Oh, my brother. 2 years, same place. I just want to encourage you. The church has a ministry for men cancer survivors, and a lot of us are prostate, and we meet on a regular basis. And so we'll talk in a second. Make sure I get your email. We'll put you on the list, and we'll talk. So, to all the brothers here under Minister Newberry, we have a ministry where just men who have had cancer. A lot of us had prostate cancer, both taking the prostate out or having the radiation thing, and we all get together first Saturday of the month. We talk and we laugh and we complain and we joke, and then we talk serious and we pray and because most of it's in our heads, my brother. That's where it all is. After the initial surgery or whatever else, the rest of this thing is about what's in our heads, and so we talk everything through. So I'll talk to you in a second. We'll make sure you're on the list. I do want to ask you one question. We drink water. Don't do the sodas unless once in a while we want to taste it in our mouth. But we drink water, but we drink the ionized water. Now, is that something different than the spring bottled water that you buy? Is that what you're trying to tell us?
Well, the ionized water is actually a good water. That's like through like a Kangen machine. What kind of machine do you have? Like an ionizer?
No, we go to Whole Foods and
I would not buy ionized water. See, the concept of ionized water was that you take it, it filters the water, Got it? But it does not remove the hydrogen. See, the greatest source of energy in the universe is hydrogen. Got it? So that's what the hydrogen, you got 150 trillion cells in your body. Everyone moves with a little engine, is hydrogen. Got it? So when you take ionized water, it's raising the alkalinity of the water so that you can receive that. So now you can now fight off bacteria, virus, fungus, parasites, even cancer. So what you have to do is ionized water will clean, and then when it filters, it separates the water. You got acid and you got alkaline. Got it? So that's a good water, but you never want to hold on to that water outside of a few days because it's going to lose its charge. Got it? So never buy that water, but if you have it in your home attached to your faucet, that's actually a good water. Like, for example, Aaron Brockovich. Everyone knows Aaron Brockovich. Aaron Brockovich was actually the one that actually was part of what was going on in Flint, Michigan. They came to her 5 years before they actually admitted to the public that there was a problem in Flint, Michigan. She told them immediately, you need to shut it all down and put an ionizer at the tap. But we talking about black folks, so that never went well because the government would have to provide that. So ionizer works, but it has to be at the tap. Got it? So your good water, if you have an ionizer, you can buy the ionizer machines. The one that probably the top marquee one would be Kangen, Kangen. Okay? But the best you can't beat God at his game, is spring water bottled at the source. And they're selling one called Crystal Geyser right at the Dollar Tree store. You can't beat the dollar store. That's just like God. It's almost like saying, I want to put it in the dollar store and see who's looking. It's that simple. It comes from the largest mountains in the United States. Crystal Geyser, being one of the companies, pulls it from the Adirondack Mountains. Got it? If you're down south, it's the Blue Ridge. If you're out west, it's Mount Shasta, Mount Sierra. But it's pure source water. Poland Springs is a bad water because it says spring water, but it's not bottled at the source. So when you bottle it at the source, it's deep in the earth, untouched by air, and these things called geysers or aquifers. So deep that when they tap it in the earth. So when you open it, that's the first time it touches air. Got it? So that's a big difference when it comes to your body and the regeneration of your cells. Got it? That's the difference. So that's the better water, right at the dollar store. Oh, you don't even have to buy a Kangen machine.
So spring water bottled at the source.
Bottled at the source, not from the source, because from the source could be the spigot. You go at the source, deep in the earth.
And so the label says that?
Yes, it does. It says right on the front. Spring water, bottled at the source. Crystal Geyser's one. There's another one called Eternal. That's another one sold in the dollar store. There's another one called Mountain Valley, Aquapana, Fiji. These are just some off the top of the head. These are some of the best waters that you can get for your body to receive energy. That means when you drink this water, you're going to get the most nutrients out of your food just by drinking good water. But if you drink the wrong water, it's going to steal life from you. That's why we say no purified, no filtered, no reverse osmosis, and no distilled waters. They steal the life out of you. Got it? It means the difference. It makes a difference.
I have a bottle of Crystal
All right, we'll talk
Geyser,
later.
Doc.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a bottle in my office you could buy for 99 cents.
Going to the dollar store.
Tell you about real quick about water before your question, sir. Sure. I remember reading about some of the things that probably lost Martin his life because Martin King his life because he really challenged this system of insanity. He said something about 1967 about how one of these days they're gonna have y'all buying water.
Hello guys, my name is Robert Miller. I'm from out of town. I'm from Maryland, but I came here specifically for this event. It's wonderful from what I've seen so far. I like the subject that you talked about, something that's dear to my heart. That's preventive. You talk about the vitamin D, your immune system. I've made attempts to do that half my life. Right now, I never had any kind of debilitating diseases or anything like that, diabetes or anything like that. I'm 74 now, and I feel good. I have a question about something that I've been practicing recently. That's intermediate fasting. There's all different kinds of fasting you do like that. The one that I'm interested in is a 12-hour. It's 12 hours a day, 12 to 16 hours a day for 3 months. And I'm saying that speeds up your metabolisms and really energizes you. It clears everything out and makes you feel better. And I'd like to know some of your thoughts on that. Intermediate fasting.
Yes. Intermediate fasting. First of all, fasting, we don't do what technically is real fasting. Just to give you an example, an ancient biblical fast actually included you stop from retaining of all food, got it, until it actually all comes out of the entire digestive system. It takes 3 days, got it, 3 days for all of that to come out of your system. That means no eating, just fluid. You can drink water, but long as it takes 3 days, then the fast begins, got it? So usually when you see fasting nowadays, because people's systems are so compromised and so acidic already, you have to prepare for a fast. That means you got to build up to before you even get started. So I would recommend getting an assessment first to see where you are. As far as, are you prepared for a fast? Are you in a position for a fast? Fasting is not good for someone who's already has a chronic condition or is in a position where they're already been a compromised immune system. So you got to be careful. But intermittent fasting does work. It does work. It allows the body to reset. And we say reset because we know that we should be cleansing every change of seasons. As the seasons change, you change. Beginning of every summer, winter, spring, fall. And as we do this, you eat, you must eliminate. Right?
First of all, it's free. No co-payments. You pace yourself at your own pace, and yes, try to get to the 72nd hour on just, liquids. Stay hydrated. Second thing is that if you look at some studies that started in the lab, showing even with cancer patients, I'm talking about advanced cancer patients or rats or guinea pigs, it was shown in a fasted model versus the Ensure model with advanced cancer that they outlive the fed model. So Dr. Walter Longo and some of his people in UCLA took this to the most desperate patients at the Institutional Review Board. They got that done and took it to some of the patients with cancers, advanced cancers with the port and everything. And they saw the same effect. Now, how that's matured, I'm not certain to this day because I haven't followed it in maybe a year or so. But the fact of the matter is, when the body, in the history of mankind, we've been kind of like these animals until the 20th century where you got grocery stores on every corner and fast food restaurants. I won't even get into that part. But you've been mostly in a state of fasting. The body got super efficient historically in that state at repairing DNA mutations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Diabetes and hypertension and those things are a no-brainer. I advocate it all the time. I mean, you fast anyway 8 hours, and you get up and break your fast. Take it to noon. Learn how to, and monitor your medications, though. Because if you are a person with chronic illnesses, as Dr. Paul was saying, you have to be extremely careful. I don't say no, and you definitely do it in conjunction with those who have you on those medications, including me. Because, you can get some profound changes. Like, for instance, if you're a metformin diabetic, Januvia, your blood sugars aren't going to necessarily go through the roof. Correction, they're not going to necessarily drop down or whatever, too low or high, but you need to monitor it because you never know. If you're going to fast, remember, you're not taking in food. You're not taking in carbohydrates, fats, or protein. And that protein is mythological, just carbohydrates and fats and essential nutrients, really. But learn about it, read about it, study it. Intermittent fasting. There's a clinic in Ontario, Jason Fung, and there's others that they fast people for almost 40 days and 40 nights, and they got to put IVs in you and stuff like that. But they even can get rid of a large percentage of type 1 diabetics, not to mention this insulin-resistant type 2 diabetics, which means that your insulin is just dysfunctional. You got plenty of insulin around. That's why they don't have you on insulin shots. So intermittent fasting, I'm absolutely a staunch advocate of it, and I suggest that people learn about it and study it on their own because it's it's very valuable at overall health generating, and even this cancer paradigm, helpful.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, sir. Sure. Either one, it's up to you.
Hello, everyone. Being a member of Enon, my journey in life has brought me here. And I study, different world religions, but I'm here. In regard to fasting, I met Dick Gregory when I was in rehab. I've been clean for over 36 years. I had his book. He autographed it for me. And there's different kinds of fast. Rational or scientific fast is based upon the premise that toxemia is the basic causes of all diseases. That's rational fast. Then there's a spiritual fast that heightens your spiritual awareness, which all fasts will do that for you. I'm a veteran faster, and I'm grateful that, some things I learned along the way. Dr. Paul, I miss your classes, man. I do. I studied under Dr. Africa, Dr. Wyatt. Every time Dr. Seavey came to town, I was there. I had my physical last month. My birthday, I just still working part-time, retired as a painter, getting my pension, my Social Security. Some of my contemporaries not even around to even, acknowledge that. So I'm grateful, believe me, that I'm among the living. As long as you're breathing, you got a chance. Well, anyway, long story short, Doc, my primary, University of Pennsylvania, I got cortisone shots in my knees. I don't know if that was the right thing to do. They're talking about knee replacements. That's what I'm not going to do. I'm sure about that. So I know there's always an alternative to approach to healing. And I will go to the naturopathic route before I go to the allopathic route. So, and again, it's so easy to fall into that because a lot of times the choices are not given to us. We just don't know the choices that we have. And that's a great thing. And I'm blessed to be here, to be among the living and share my experience. Even in my study and my journey, I still feel that void is a void. And as spiritual beings having this physical experience, what is it that we need? How do we fill that void? And from a holistic viewpoint about addictions and they're all emotionally based, I know I'm struggling with some things I'm still recovering from after all these years. So, and we all are. We all broken vessels trying to be made whole by the Creator. And I'm just one of His children, trying to stay on the right path and do the right thing. And it's a struggle for me. And our brothers out there in the street doing what they do, if we learn to love one another, which is the basis, it's the greatest principles that God has given us, this would be a better place, man. I walk around, man, right? I work at night, man. I had to catch the bus for almost for the whole winter because now I'm driving again. But I was afraid for my life out there, man. What we doing out there to each other is just not making any sense. It's not making any sense, Doc.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
I wanted to just maybe tie it up for him a little bit. It's about balance. With it, get all the information so that you can. So that's what it's about, because all we're talking about here. Fundamentally, you need some 101 principles, and that starts with getting your water right. I actually did a list just coming here, thinking about, it's about 15 different things that you can do to get your body right. But it starts with fundamentals, having something to live by, biblical principles. Deuteronomy, y'all been to church lately? All right. We talking about it. You got to get back to it. You got to get back to your universal principles. What makes life. So be encouraged, my brother. Stay strong. but get yourself back in balance. Got it? You got to get back in balance.
And we're going to wrap it up with this one last. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I did do that intermittent fasting. I stopped eating at 8 o'clock at night, and I was starting again at 3 o'clock, and eat from 3 to 8, just those 5 hours. And I lost 10 pounds with that, you know, just because I do know that is effective. I do know, Dr. Dan, you're into plant-based diets as opposed to those types of things. Okay. What about a pescatarian diet? How was that in terms of pescatarian diet, you know, kind of just that? What are your thoughts about that?
Excellent question, because again, when people say, oh, I don't eat pork anymore because of Elijah Muhammad, I don't eat red meat anymore because of so and such, but I eat fish and chicken. I'll just deal with the pescatarian part. I'm a staunch believer that cholesterol's gotten a bad break. Cholesterol is one of the most important molecules in the human body. Basis of vitamin D, basis of bile, cortisol, stress hormones, testosterone, estrogen. It can't be a gangster molecule. Now, here's the deal. We got a war on it, right? The real war, some of us feel, cholesterol is essentially the fireman with the Dalmatian, the red truck, and all that putting the fire out. But there's this molecule that's highest levels are in fish. Eggs, the things that make them smell kind of funky, called trimethylamine. And these cardiologists need to be drilling this into your head versus statins. Statins have so many side effects, it's ridiculous. But let's just talk about trimethylamine. Trimethylamine, choline, carnitine, these things that are only not in plants, but they're only in the animal products, and the highest levels are in fish. Gets an oxygen molecule put on it by your liver, so it gets oxidized, trimethylamine oxide. And TMAO is a potent, not only prostate carcinogen, maybe it's twitching and flipping some of these genes, if you will. And I'm not going to stay stuck in the 20th century with genes either, because we're in the 21st century, and there's something called epigenetics, your ability to control these genes, like an off-on switch. So let's not get too, concerned. I mean, be concerned about it if you have a lot of family history, but understand that you're not doomed by your blueprint. Back to trimethylamine. Its role in cardiac disease is through the roof. It's like I say, look, cholesterol is a fireman sitting at this 5-alarm fire with the hose, putting it out. Trimethylamine's running around the back of the house throwing kerosene on it. Look up trimethylamine oxide. Just look it up. I show y'all that's in the office, say, look, take them cameras and those phones, because we baby boomers are almost as bad as the kids with these phones on us. Take a picture on the computer. You got to be proactive, and you got to do your own research at cartel's going to back away from statins after, I don't know how many years it's been. Of course not. But is that really the answer to your riddle? Keep on eating trimethylamine. And I tell the guys, look, I know you're not going to like this one, because no, I can't advocate. Or if you do, there's a molecule that balsamic vinegar. So I'm not trying to turn you into a grogaholic, so I can't do the red wine. Most people don't like balsamic vinegar. But I did a little cursory search and found Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts have dimethylbutanol that blocks trimethylamine, like a linebacker. And I guarantee you there's plenty more things that will block trimethylamine. So that way, if you want to deal with fish, kind of like 3-4 generations ago, that volume, not these derivatives of fish, this fake stuff, just like nuggets and buffaloes who don't have wings, all that's from the barnyard floor. What did Dr. Paul say, about 400 or 500 zillion types of DNA? That means it's just garbage masquerading as food. And I guarantee you a lot of these fish products, especially the canned stuff that can sit on shelves in 600 years, is not food anymore. So, yeah, fresh wild caught, and I don't know what Flint River or Schuylkill River you're going to get this wild caught fish out of. My coolest guys go 6 months at a time way out there in Lake Ontario or Lake Champlain. They come back with 6 months of fish. And I say, just tell me where so I can tell the next people. That's where you get this, quote, wild-caught fish from. Oh, my God, genetically modified pellets and all kinds of the stuff that they see the Wissahickon Creek with, that they tell you, this is from the Poconos. And
I just want to get one thing, if I could. I want to test Kevin. He said, pescatarian, here's the key. Fins and scales you shall freely eat. That means something. Fins and scales. That means if it has fins and scales, they're upper swimmers. They're up here. Got it? You kind of look at anything that's on the bottom. Remember, poop falls where? To the bottom. So that's why you got to stay away from the shellfish. Shrimp, lobsters, crabs, they handle a lot of bacteria, virus, and a tremendous amount of parasites. They will go in and invade your system. There's this thing called the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is like the protective coating on your central nervous system. If you break that, then that increases chances for things like Parkinson's, ALS, Lou Gehrig's, multiple sclerosis. Got it? So stay what God originally said. He said fins and scales. Upper swimmers means that if it's fins, it moves. Scales, like armor, shakes all parasites. It's clean. You got it? You got to watch the industrialization, yes, because you got to see what they did to just the salmon. Do y'all know what they just did to the salmon right now? They wanted to make the salmon grow bigger. So how do we make the salmon grow bigger? Because everybody loves salmon in America. So how do we do this? We're going to make it grow bigger by mixing the genes with something that grows. So they took the human growth hormone of an eel, mixed it with the salmon. Now the salmon grows and never stops growing. This is by a company called Aqua Bounty. You got to know this stuff. So the salmon is very toxic right now. Also tilapia. The worst thing you could ever be eating is a tilapia. It has fins and scales, but it's been industrialized. The other ones that have fins with no scales would be catfish. I know I done stepped on somebody catfish critters right there. But no catfish, because he has fins with no scales. Also the flounder. That a flounder. Yeah, the flounder, he has fins with no scales. He down there floundering around. You got it? He's on the bottom. So all of these things are what we're not understanding is the life and habitat of what you're eating. And if you eat what it eats, what something else eats, you're going to get that. And right now, they're pulling them from the contaminated beds where all the oil spills are. So now you're getting some titanium along with that. So these are the things we talk about. So fins and scales. One that's really good alternative for salmon is called steelhead trout. Steelhead trout. Steelhead trout is good. Red snapper is good. Kingfish is good. Croakers, spots. All those that are like walleye, all those fish that actually are upper swimmers. So you got a choice. You got anything you want. Fins and scales, though, bro. Stay away from the other stuff.
All right. How many of y'all in here are hungry and going to do right? This has truly been a blessing. Truly been a blessing to have us all together. Absolutely. I want to thank all the panelists for their time and their pearls of wisdom. I want to thank Dr. Michael Daniels. I want to thank also Reverend Blaine Newberry. I want to thank Camille Reagan, Dr. Paul Hopkins, and I also want to thank Dr. Keith Crawford. So thank you all for, again, such rich dialogue, discussion around an extremely important topic to our community, which is prostate cancer. It has been truly a blessing for everything that we've learned, everything that we've talked about, and that we've discussed today. I also would like to acknowledge my pastor, Dr. Alyn Waller. All right. And so I'd like for the panelists to also give the audience a round of applause because it's truly a blessing. Amen. Amen. So that concludes our panel discussion for this afternoon. Thank you all very much for your time. God bless. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thanks.